Welcome everyone to the final game of the match between Peter Svidler and Vidit Gujrathi. It's the final blitz game. Peter has the white pieces and we are ready to go. A handshake and pawn up to c4, the English opening. Vidit takes a few seconds and brings out his knight to f6. g3 played, fianchettoing the bishop on the long diagonal. And Vidit now has to decide where is he going. Will he play e6? Will he play c5? Will he go g6? He's taking a lot of time in the opening. He goes g6, bishop g2 and plays the very classical central line with e6 d5. Svidler is going for the double fianchetto, but one of the bishops is going to get closed here on the diagonal with d4, but it opens up the other bishop. Now Svidler taking his time because bishop b2 e5 would mean that there's a wall against that bishop. Now c5, what nice center for Vidit Gujrathi here. He seems to be doing very well out of the opening. e3 played, knight comes out, and now we have a reversed Benoni kind of setup where the b3 move doesn't look that great. White castles, and what does Vidit do? He can play bishop e7, but he decides to develop his bishop on d6, slightly more active and actually a good square. Later on he can play e5 and have very strong control in the center. He plays rook up to e1 and that's a good move. He castles it out here, and Svidler has to figure out where is his counterplay coming from. He goes bishop a3, which is a nice move because at the end of the day this bishop would have been passive on b2. Instead it's exchanging itself with the other bishop here. Vidit goes e5. This is beautiful center with e5 and d4, and later on you can trade these bishops, and white is trying to get his knight to d2. White has less space, but there's enough for all his pieces. Bishop comes to f5, so that now you can't develop your knight to d2. The d3 pawn would be hanging. Of course, firstly you have to trade the bishops because the knight is defending the bishop here. He goes knight to h4. Very interesting. The bishop now slightly pushes the queen. Provoking f3 would be good because the bishop on g2 would be passive. So goes queen c1. He moves his queen away. And the game is getting very interesting and exciting. Vidit brings his rook out to e8. And now Peter also develops his knight to d2 because now if you see the bishop is defended by the queen. Vidit has to see where is his next play coming from. A good idea here can be knight to b4. The point being you want to fix it with a5 and then you have complete bind on the dark squares. That would be a very strong idea in this position. And Vidit has 1 minute 50 seconds. He is taking his time. The other point could be to just simply avoid the trade of bishops with bishop c7, but Vidit actually captures the bishops, takes and plays a5. Very logical. He wants to put his knight on b4 and attack the d3 weakness. That's a weak point in white's position. So a5 is a very solid move by Vidit. He is planning to get his knight to b4. What does Peter Svidler do? I think a possibility is to go to c1, then to b1, defending this pawn, and later on kicking away the knight from b4. In that moment, the knight on b4 is attacking d3, but there's no other piece that can join because the bishop which wants to come to f5 and attack is actually controlled here by the knight on h4. So there's no way you can put additional pressure on b4. This is what Peter is thinking, that how to meet with its knight b4 move. And he goes queen b2. He plays this move, very logical, very fine. Will Vidit actually lash out with g5 because then after knight goes back he can later on attack the d3 pawn with bishop f5. It is possible to do that. Also remember there's knight d7, knight c5 option. The knight often goes to this square in such structures of the Benoni. It's a reversed Benoni, so knight on c5 would be doing brilliantly there. Vidit can go for it. He has 1 minute 15 seconds to figure out what to do. Both the players have taken a lot of time on the clock in the opening. They are trying to be precise. Also they are very tired. It's been 6 days. They've played 15 games against each other. This is the final 16th game. Now the d3 pawn is attacked. You can defend it with bishop f1, or you can defend it with queen b1. He goes queen b1, defends the d3 pawn, and the queen comes up to d7. But now I can push away your knight firstly. That is an important thing to do, and that's what Peter does. He pushes the knight away, and Vidit comes back to c6. He brings his knight back here, and queen comes up. Slowly, if white can get b4, then b5, then his bishop gets into power, then his majority on the queen side also starts to roll. So Vidit needs to figure out where is his play coming from, because slowly he could get outplayed. Maybe he wants to trade the bishop with bishop h3. Yes, he does it. He wants to trade that. And maybe you can avoid it with bishop h1. Will Peter Svidler want to do that? Not really. He says, I'm okay with the trade. I'm actually going all out on the queen side with b4. Bishop takes bishop, and the king captures the bishop now. So some of the venom on the queen side majority is reduced because this bishop, which was so powerful on the long diagonal, has been traded. And Vidit goes for the thematic b5 break. What a nice move. Peter nods his head in agreement. If you take here, there is check, and you will take back this pawn. So he takes on a8, Vidit recaptures here. And now need to figure out what to do as white. Do you want to push c5? But that would mean that check here, the queen enters, and it's, you know, the rook can enter on a2 then, and it's actually complete debacle. So knight goes to f3, and Vidit plays his queen to d6, but that's a blunder. He just blunders a pawn. Takes on b4, that is his idea, but now look at this. You can go knight c4, you can hit e5, and you are winning material. You can actually take it directly as well, but knight c4 is very powerful. So queen d6 by Vidit was a big mistake there. He's made a huge error, and Peter Svidler just needs to figure out what to do. Look, knight c4, there is no knight d3 also possible, because after knight takes b2, there is b6, and this pawn is very strong, and that's what he has done. He's gone knight c4, and Vidit now just down to 10 seconds. There's no time to take this. Vidit has to move his queen. He has to play it to queen c5. No, he goes queen f8. But now the pawn, knight takes on e5, not only winning a pawn, but also defending d3. Queen comes up forward, but just push this pawn to b6. It's a very powerful pawn. You don't want to be losing that pawn. Peter Svidler is taking his time. He has 26 seconds. Vidit is down to just 4 seconds. Peter needs to move. He needs to push his pawn. Yes, he pushes it. Great move. White is totally winning. Vidit chops off the pawn. Even you take back the knight, then the knight on c4 is hanging. But guys, this is totally lost position, because now after queen takes c4, you have b7 coming in, followed by rook c1, rook c8. Oh my goodness, he goes rook c1. Now if you take the knight, here there is b7 and rook c8. So Vidit gives a check. King g1 is completely winning here. Rook d8. Just push the pawn to b7. No, he goes rook c5 and he drops his advantage. No, Vidit goes queen e4. He moves his queen up. b7 again is winning because back rank issues. But no, now back rank is gone. He's actually going to lose the pawn on b6. And that is the end. Peter there just completely livid with himself. He missed it totally. What did he do? He plays his queen here up to a2. He just blundered the pawn there. Queen takes d3, and now after takes, queen comes back. Take here, smiling there, and the queens are traded, and that's the end of the match. What a finish. Both players smiling, Peter laughing there with it. Not sure what he's thinking, but he was completely lost there. But it was a great match. In the end, Vidit Gujrathi has won the match against Peter Svidler with a score of 17.5, 10.5. Great match.